The following article is from the People newspaper from the 29th of 11th 2009. A supergrass who nailed the notorious Essex boys murderers is working as a drug dealer whilst living under a new identity the People can reveal. Darren Nicholls, 44, who cost the taxpayer more than $150,000 to be given a fresh life, fixed a deal with an undercover reporter to set up a sophisticated cannabis factory which he claimed was capable of netting millions. Tubby Nicholls was the star prosecution witness in the 1995 gangland executions of drug barons Tony Tucker, Patrick Tate and Craig Rolfe, where he claimed he was the getaway driver for killers Michael Steele and Jack Worms. But despite leading a supposed life of anonymity, he offered to set up the illegal factory anywhere in the county to begin making proper dough. He said he could use our man's £10,000 investment to create an operation making £4,000 a week. During a secret half-hour meeting at a location in the south of England, the former electrician turned underworld supergrass, boasted of making thousands of pounds from drug dealing, bragged how his connections could shift the drugs with ease, smirked at police attempts to clamp down on drugs. After arriving in a rusty Mercedes van, Scruffy Nicholls, whose new identity we cannot reveal for legal reasons, claimed to have made top money from his legal practice. Sweating profusely and out of breath, he bragged how he takes holidays in the Caribbean and drives flash supercars. Trusting our man, he said, "The reason I got involved was to make a bit of money. It's a good earner. I'm an electrician by trade, so I would sort out other people's electrics who was into growing it, the cannabis, and it went from there really. I started doing it myself. It ain't difficult. You've got to keep a low profile, but I'm often in the Caribbean. I got myself a flash Porsche. It's all sweet." We launched our investigation following a tip-off that Nicholls was looking for investment to further his drugs empire. After making contact, it was agreed that our man would need between £10,000 and £12,000 up front. Within 5 minutes of meeting for the first time, Nicholls said, "There's money to be made, easy money. If you're ready to do it now, I can get moving by next week. We'll plant the crop and it'll be ready in about 14 weeks. Then after that we're rolling." Asked what would happen once the crop was ready, smirking, Nicholls said, "Oh, I've got no problems getting rid of it. If you said to me, we can go ahead and get it done now, and you ain't fucking about, then we've got no problems." He then told of drug factories he'd set up in barns. Nicholls told our man to assemble a team to help him with the setup, and he bragged how his contacts could easily get rid of the drugs. He advised that the harvests should be distributed when still wet, adding, "They lose 70% of their weight when they're dry." Nicholls, who once claimed he was the target of a £250,000 assassin's contract, added, "My contacts can get rid of it for £140 to £130 an ounce." Eager for a deal, he said, "I can get somewhere to set it up in, but if you say you have a place, we can do it next week. I've got all the equipment, I know what I'm doing. It's easy when you know how." Asked if any of the profits would be needed to reinvest in further drug dens, Nicholls replied, "You don't need to. You just stick to one place. It will be enough. You just keep doing it until you get caught. I've been caught twice, and it don't mean shit. A caution, that's all it is. Then you move on to the next one." Confident a deal was done, grinning Nicholls left our reporter saying, "We'll get it done. I'll see you again." Supergrass Darren Nicholls is waiting for the hitman's bullet after giving evidence in the trial of one of Britain's most brutal gangland slayings. The Mole astonished murder squad detectives by breaking cover to point the finger at the killers in the notorious Rettenham triple murders. Last week, his sensational evidence convicted thugs Michael Steele and Jack Worms for the cold-blooded ambush of 3 rival drug dealers. Speaking for the first time since his dramatic decision to turn informer, Nicholls described how he is now coping with life as the target of a £250,000 assassin's contract. And he relived the murderous plot to wipe out the 3 crooks at the centre of an international drug smuggling ring on an icy December night 2 years ago. "I had to give evidence," he said. "It was either them or me. I was the only witness to what they had done. They realised that, and I was told my days were numbered." Up until the trial, detectives gave Nicholls a 24-hour armed guard, and his family were put up in a series of safe houses. Crack officers from the Essex Police Armed Protection Unit shadowed every move for fear he would be killed before giving evidence. Last week, an Old Bailey jury convicted Steele, 55, and henchman Worms, 36, of the execution-style murders on the strength of Nicholls' statement. His evidence in the witness box was the only link between the pair and the killings of the trio as they sat in their Range Rover on an isolated Essex farm track. They'd been lured to the country spot with the promise of a lucrative cocaine drop from a plane passing overhead, but the victims had driven into a trap and were blasted to death in revenge for a gangland bust-up. Nicholls said, "When it was all over, I could not believe what they were saying. It was just too horrible for words." Worms said he was doing the world a favour by doing this, and at one point he said he felt like the angel of death. When Worms jumped into the back seat, I could see he was wearing white surgical gloves, which were covered in blood. He was joking about Mick's gun falling apart during the hit, and still just said, "They won't be threatening me again." My mouth went dry and my mind was racing. I was in shock, but I just had to get out of there. I could hardly speak, but I tried to stay on their good side and said to them, "I hope I never fall out with you." The discovery of the blood-splattered Range Rover the following morning sparked one of the biggest inquiries Essex Police has ever dealt with. The investigation and subsequent 9-week trial is said to have cost more than $1.5 million. But until Nicholls agreed to give his critical evidence, detectives were baffled. Ivan Dibley was just 4 months away from retiring when he was plunged into the biggest case of his career. Former Detective Superintendent Dibley, 52, said, "Early on, I had the hunch that whoever had gone down that lane with the 3 men was trusted by them. I suspected he had lured them to the scene where somebody else could have been waiting. If that was right, then I guessed that it would also be a getaway driver. Teams who commit major crimes rarely, if ever, drive themselves away from the scene." We asked Rolf's partner, Donna Jaggers, if she had any idea who the killer could be. She revealed the men and said they were going to meet somebody called Mickey the Pilot, the nickname of Michael Steele. When we checked Steele's telephone records, we found a series of calls to Jack Worms. Worms and Steele had also called Darren Nicholls. He turned out to be the driver. I believe that if we could get enough evidence to bring in the getaway driver, he would crack. The victims, Pat Tate, 37, Tony Tucker, 38, and Craig Rolfe, 26, drove to the isolated field in Retterdon, near Basildon, after Steele promised to share in a cocaine drop. They believed the invite marked the end of a feud. Nicholls told how Steele regularly smuggled cannabis into the country across the channel from the coast of Belgium, but in November 1995, a £70,000 deal between Steele and Tate turned sour when Tate accused the suppliers of giving him poor quality cannabis. Nicholls said, "Pat Tate was furious he'd been given a substandard batch. He was angry because he knew he needed his customers' confidence. Tate demanded his cash back, and after much haggling with the supplier in Amsterdam, Steele got it for him. But Steele discovered that 1/3 of the haul was fine, and that Tate had sold it on and made a profit. Steele was also potting it about that Steele hadn't paid back the money, and he said he would make him admit it before shooting him dead." The countdown to the executions had begun. On the afternoon of December the 6th, 1995, Nicholls received a call on his mobile phone from Steele asking to meet him. "I linked it with Steele and Worms outside a motorbike shop in a village outside Colchester," said Nicholls. "I joined Steele in Toyota and we set off with Worms following behind. I knew something awful was going to happen when we went to the car park of the Halfway House pub, where Steele told us to find a space where we could watch him but couldn't be seen. Tate arrived in the Range Rover with Rolfe and Tucker. That was our signal to head off to the farm track. As Worms lay in wait behind a bush at the top of the track 20 miles away, Steele climbed into Tate's Range Rover to steer the 3 into the ambush. Shortly after 6:45 p.m, the F-Reg motor turned down the track and pulled up at a locked gate. Steele left the vehicle on the pretext of opening the gate. Worms stepped out of the darkness and the carnage began. The driver, Rolfe, is believed to have been the first man to die with a shot to his head. In a fraction of a second, Worms' pump-action shotgun was aimed at Tucker, sitting in the front passenger seat. It fired one shot into his face, killing him instantly. Behind him sat Tate. He was found shot in the stomach and head. The attack was over within 20 seconds and 8 shots had been fired. Officers believe Worms blasted each of the men once to immobilise them before picking them off with further rounds. 2 farmhands stumbled across the grim scene the next morning and thought the men were sleeping, until they saw the blood trickling out of the motor onto the snow on the ground. Nicholls said, "I drove them back to Marks Tay near Colchester. I was in a state of shock and Steele kept asking if I was okay. I parked up and got into the Toyota with Steele. Then Worms drove off. Steele said Worms was cold-hearted because he'd shot all three without any emotion. Old Bailey Judge Mr Justice Anthony Hidden jailed the pair for life, recommending they serve a minimum of 15 years. He told them, "You are extremely dangerous men who had not the slightest compunction for resorting to violence when you thought it was necessary." Since last week's trial, Nicholls has been moved to another secret address, with his police guard stepped up. He has also tried to dramatically change his appearance.